Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. This is Selena here as the Empath Abroad, and I'm so excited to talk about this topic today because I'm someone who first came abroad at the age of 21. This journey of living outside of the US started when I studied abroad in Spain, Madrid specifically, and I would just say that single decision to go abroad has completely has completely changed the trajectory of my life. I feel that if not for going abroad to Korea, I would not have. I said going abroad to Korea. I'm in South Korea now, so hi from South Korea. But had I not made the decision to go abroad and study abroad in Spain originally, I don't think I would have taken the steps to continue building and living a life abroad. And as I look at my life now, I am less than a year from turning 40. So that's exciting. And I'm also thinking about, well, how do I want to live in my 40s? Like, what interchanges and direction do I want to embody as I approach turning 40? Which, I don't consider that old at all. I think I was doing like an online tutoring session with a teenager, and she talked about traveling. She was abroad and she was sharing a story, and there was some encounter that her family had with another man, and she was like, yeah, he was so old. I think he was like 36. And I didn't say anything. I just smiled, but I was like, wow. I remember being a kid, I thought like when I was like 8 years old, meeting teenagers, they seemed like so old to me. But anyway, so I'm almost 40, and I'm thinking about how I want to close out these 30s, but also what is the direction I want to see for my life. And I know life is full of surprises because I have been, been on one track or trajectory, and then life inspires me to do something else and to switch gears into a new direction. But in general, I'm thinking about how has my life changed from my 20s living abroad, or how have I changed? How has who I am changed and shifted from living abroad in my 20s versus in my 30s to almost 40s right now? So I made a little list, and I realized it's funny, like the 30s to 40 side is a little bit longer than the 20s. So, but things might come to me as I'm speaking and sharing this. But as far as when I came in my 20s, I think that as I acquired more life experiences, like for me, I haven't been abroad consecutively, like from 20s to now. I've had like chapters of life where I was abroad. I went back to the States. I worked a few jobs there. I felt like I really needed to disconnect and leave those environments. So I felt motivated to go abroad again. So right now, this is my fourth stint in Korea. And as far as a change in this dynamic, as far as being here now, and I notice at this stage of my life versus in my 20s, I'm also thinking of, well, what is the shape that I really want my life to take as far as how I'm looking ahead past 40 into my 50s and 60s. And I also am considering more so, well, what kind of lifestyle really meets me in terms of my needs? And I think what I consider now as far as the environments that support me, what I see differently compared to my 20s is that I'm really looking at what quality of life do I really value the most. As far as I'm at a point where there are certain things that are non-negotiables for me, as far as things I don't tolerate as much, that I just kind of brushed aside or just said, yeah, it is what it is when I was in my 20s. But as I went through life experiences, I had 2 years of life living in New York, and I reached a point before coming back to Korea now where I was like, quality of life is so important to me. I love that I don't need to own a car living here in East Asia. And I realize I'm at a point in my life where I want to continue to be in environments where I don't need to feel the necessity to own a car. Whereas in my 20s, I was willing to like just kind of say, well, just, it is what it is. I can live in the States, I can go abroad, but, I can live in the States and just kind of, deal with that dynamic. But 2 years ago, a year and a half before coming back to Korea, I was like, I really want to live in an environment that prioritizes my well-being when it comes to not needing to rely on a car. I want to live in an environment where safety is strong, and I don't feel I need to look over my shoulder or worry about gun violence. I just feel like I'm at a point in my life where there are non-negotiables, and I know that I'm not willing to kind of compromise on those things. And those are really stronger in my mind at this phase of my life compared to my 20s, where again, you're just going through life experiences and finding who you are and what meets your needs, what resonates and what doesn't connect, what lands and what doesn't. So that's a big thing. Another thing that's different, I think in my 20s, as far as being abroad, I think I'm still a social person, but I'm more intentional about who I make friends with. Like, I would say I'm at the stage in my life where I am still trying to build a very intentional friendship circle of people who I really feel understand me, and I don't have to feel I need to shrink from who I am, especially when it comes to like spirituality and that dynamic. So I feel that in my 20s, I was just kind of open to just hanging out. Not so open, but I think I was more like flexible with like building friendships or like keeping friends around, even though I was like, I don't really know if this person is right for me, but there's someone to hang out with. So I felt that in my 20s, I was just more open to keeping friendships just for the sake of having someone around and not really being, I mean, I've always been kind of like an introvert, a loner. Even as like a young kid, I was okay with being alone by myself. So even in my 20s, I didn't mind having moments alone, but I feel like now I really prioritize being in a place of peace, even if that means I'm not around a lot of people, even if it means I spend a few weekends a month where I'm not really hanging out with anyone, but just myself. Maybe I'll go to a meetup from meetup.com and hang out with some people. Like 2 weekends ago, I went on a city walk with the meetup.com group, which was really nice. Had good conversation, connected with some people. I didn't feel like this pressure inside, like, oh, before I go, I need to connect and get someone's phone number and, exchange Instagrams. I'm really not at that place, which, speaking of which, this also hit my mind. I'm also not so inclined to just openly share my Instagram or in Korea, they use something called Kakao Talk. It's like a messaging app. I have had moments, over the past few months being here at this stage of my life where people say I was at an event and they're like, oh, can we exchange Instagrams? I am comfortable. I am comfortable now with saying, that's okay. We don't have to exchange Instagrams, but you're really nice. Or I might say, well, if you want to share your ID with me, I can, check out your Instagram and, go from there. But I'm not so inclined to just have people, like when it comes to my personal Instagram, like just sharing that with everybody. Like I'm very much secure with not being so exposed as far as like I have to have followers, I have to have this and that. Which I know I'm on camera now sharing my story, but I feel me sharing my story is also part of me being connected to a sense of purpose. Like someone needs to hear this story, someone who is perhaps in a position or place where they're maybe thinking about making a life change or wanting to move abroad. And I feel that my experience and my voice can add value and clarity to someone who is looking to make a change in their life. So I'm at a comfortable balance where it's like I don't need to share my Instagram with everyone, but also recognize that I have a voice and a story to tell. And so I'm very selective about how I share my voice, how I share my story, how I expose, my voice and myself to other people when it comes to that. So I'm not someone who's like chasing followers or like trying to get everyone's Instagram. I just really want to get to know a person and see who they are and how they are. So I'm not so pressed about that. Although in my 20s, like Instagram, was not a big thing. It was more Facebook, which I rarely even post on Facebook. I'm mostly on Facebook just to connect with groups that relate to living abroad as far as resources and getting, questions answered from other people when I'm like stuck on like, well, how do you do this in this country, or what is this. So that's a big difference between my 30s and my 20s living abroad. So another thing is with Korea, I recognize like the K-pop and the K-dramas are really like taking off. Like there's so much more exposure to Korean culture. And when I was here in my 20s, like first I didn't know what K-pop was before I left the States. I didn't find out about that until I got here. And so I had like my phase of like really being into K-pop, and I went to a few K-pop concerts, and it was fun for the time that it was in. And so when I talk to people now about, I'm living in Korea, they'll say like, oh, well, do you like K-pop, or like, what's your favorite K-pop group? I I really am not into K-pop. I forced myself to watch K-pop Demon Hunters, which I really liked. For the record, I did like K-pop Demon Hunters. But my reason for watching it was because I work with young kids. A lot of them were talking about this. And as a teacher, I just want to be aware of like, well, what are the students tapped into? Like what are the interests that my young kids have? Because understanding what their interests are can also help me know how to create fun lessons and to, make fun references to things that they relate to right now. So for me, connecting with K-pop, it's more so in relation to allowing that to help me build a bridge as it relates to working with my students, my kids, and helping them. So that's the reason for me. So I'm not a K-pop fangirl. I was watching K-dramas before I left the States, but it was more so because I really miss Korea, and I also wanted a break and something different from a lot of the US type shows, as far as a lot of Korean dramas aren't as overtly like sexualized. You may watch 5 episodes before you see anyone have a kiss. So I really just like the different tone that K-dramas have. But since living here, I have not really watched any K-dramas because I feel like I'm just living life and paying my bills and going to work and just trying to have a more grounded experience, and knowing that a lot of those things in K-dramas are not the reality of life in Korea. There was one K-drama, it's called Business Proposal, and I had this awareness when I was watching it because there's a scene where the 2 lead stars, the lady and the guy, there's a scene where they meet at this place called Namsan Tower. And mind you, to get up to Namsan Tower, well, you can take a bus up there, you have to start from the bottom, but this is a mountain park, right? There's a nice observatory with restaurants at the top. You can take some good pictures, but the scene just felt unrealistic because I'm like, well, first of all, like she took a cab that would drive her all the way up to Namsan Tower. There's no one there but them, which is really rare because usually there's a lot of people at Namsan Park. And so it just felt like it was created just for that particular scene. So yeah, I am living in a more grounded sense of reality as far as that goes. So if you're a K-drama lover, nice for you, that's great. It can give good exposure to Korean life and society, but it's not the definitive answer. So I would say coming here as a tourist is different from living here, I would say. So so also at this stage of life, I'm also thinking more about family as far as the kind of family I want to create and build. And also just saying that I want to really build a life abroad. I don't have any intention of wanting to move back to the US. I've told myself the only thing that would take me back would be something really drastic happening, maybe with family, or there's just something that, as I judge the situation, would have to be so strong that I would feel the pull, like, okay, I guess I need to go back. But I really do think about, at this phase of life, like wanting to raise children abroad, wanting to, get married and settle down, and also considering, if not Korea, what other international spaces would also support raising, a family abroad, especially children who would have, a Black mother like me. And, if my kids have a father who's of another, racial background, just also considering what spaces would also support them being from a diverse background without having to live in the US. So I also want diversity for them, but not within the space of the US. I do feel I have a responsibility to share with them my culture as a US citizen, as an American. So I do think about, well, what kinds of trips would I want to make to the States, to expose my kids to, my side of the family, to Black culture, and also keeping it alive within my home space through the music, through foods that I make, through history, through helping them understand the history of Black Americans and the contributions that have been made by Black Americans around the world. So I think about that. So I think I'm in a place of my life where, with the experiences and lessons and so much that I went through in my 20s, early 30s, mid 30s, I think a lot of that has created the foundation of how I'm living abroad now. Which, another thing on my list is a change of identity. So one thing that I did before I left the States, I didn't know that I was going to do this, but I actually legally changed my entire name. So thank you if you love the name Selena. I was not born as Selena. That was not the name my parents gave me, but it's the name that I chose for myself 2 years ago. And I think that that change of name also, on an energetic level, also created shifts within me as far as how I live and now carry myself. So how I am as Selena is also very different from the person I was with the other name that I was given at birth by my parents. So that is also beautiful to see, like how I'm living life abroad as Selena versus the identity, the name that I had before in the other iterations of life abroad. So they all count, they all come together. And I just really feel like this is a different chapter of my life and a new trajectory. And it's exciting. So yeah, 20 years abroad versus 30s. So to sum it up, I feel in my 20s, it was about finding myself, learning what I liked, what I didn't like, what kinds of people supported me, making mistakes, going through experiences that would help give me clarity about who I am. And so I think the 30s, early 30s, mid to now, I think it's been about refining those awarenesses that have come up so that way it can help mold me deeper into the person that I want to be going into my 40s and 50s. So living intentionally, really being okay with not having the most amount of friends, which a true story. I would say that I think I don't know what the quote is, but I know people often say, like, I don't know if I was watching a show, but someone was saying like, you know, like hold on to your friends because like you can't replace a friend or something around those lines. But I disagree with it because one of the biggest changes that occurred in my life was letting go of a friendship that was about 20 years of existence. So I had a friend that I met in middle school, and we were friends teenage years, went to high school together. We were very close in our 20s, early 30s, mid 30s, and then I won't say all the drama, or not that it was dramatic, but it was also a situation that I was placed in where my intuition was tested, and also being called to choose myself. So you have to recognize that even if you're in a friendship, you're also still your own individual, and to not be afraid to put self-love first over the friendship, especially if that person is not willing to understand your individuality and your own humanity within that friendship. And if your individuality and your humanity is not being honored and respected, whether it's a 10-year friendship, 20-year friendship, 30-year friendship, you have to be willing to determine within yourself, is this going to support me in the direction that I'm going, or is it time to close out this chapter and be willing to start again with new friendships, with new people who see me in the version of me that I am now, not the version of me that I was. Oh, I like that. Ooh, that gave me chills. So the version of me that I am now versus the version that I was, because who I was is not who I am. So we're always shifting, actually with an asterisk, we are shifting, but there has to be an intention to want to stay with those shifts as far as your highest growth and your highest good. So I'll leave it there. Thank you for watching. And again, if you like this video, please give a like, leave a comment. If you are someone who has spent years abroad, or if you've had iterations of life abroad, and maybe you have spent 20s abroad, 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever age group you're in, I'd love to know, how has living abroad changed you, or what changes have you seen in yourself over those changes and courses and age progressions of your own life. I really love to know. Leave a comment, like the video, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.